Hi guys, today we're going to be talking about elections and the process that occurs in order for an election to happen and someone to actually get office. First thing you need to know is that it is extremely complicated. You would think that people just go to the voting booth on election day, they place their vote, and whoever gets the most votes wins. But that is not what happens. Because we have a representative democracy, there are a few more steps in between there. You need to understand the Electoral College. These are the people that actually get to vote for the president. So every 4 years, the president and vice president are elected through a system based on this Electoral College. This is a group of people called the presidential electors who are chosen in each state and Washington, D.C., and who cast formal votes for the president and the vice president. The number of electoral representatives in each state is determined by the state's population. So this number, like the seats in the House of Representatives, is calculated using census data. So determine the number of electoral votes each state gets. One simply has to add the number of senators for the state, which is always 2, no matter where you are, to the number of members in the House for that state. So, for example, Ohio, we have 16 House of Representatives members, and then we have 2 senators. So those added together, we get 18 electoral votes. California, on the other hand, gets 55. And Minnesota has a little bit smaller population. They only get 10 electoral votes. Maine only gets 2. So the number of electoral college representatives in each state is determined by the state's population. So this number, just like the seats in the House, is calculated using census data, so how many people are living in the state. So for example, in Ohio, we have 16 members in the House of Representatives. We have 16 people representing our state. Plus we have 2 senators. So we add those together, and that means we have 18 representatives in the Electoral College. By contrast, California has a lot more people, so they have their 2 senators plus 53 House members for a total of 55 people in the Electoral College. So California gets a little more say in the presidential election. Then, if we look at, say, North Dakota, they have a very small population, so they only have 3 people in the Electoral College, and they have very little say in the presidential election. Before 1961, voters in Washington, D.C. did not get a voice in the elections. The 23rd Amendment changed this by giving the district as many electoral votes as it would have if it were a state. The minimum number is 3. So every state has at least 3 electoral votes. This is the minimum number. Now, while Washington, D.C. has 3 representatives in the Electoral College, they do not have representation in Congress. Because there are 435 members of the House and there are 100 senators, plus the 3 extra from Washington, D.C., the maximum number of electoral votes in the election today is 538. When a voter votes in the presidential election, he or she is not actually casting a ballot for their selected candidate, but rather is endorsing the member of the Electoral College who will then directly vote for the president. Your vote does count. You're saying who you want the president to be, and the representatives in the Electoral College then take that vote into account when they choose who the president will be. So, to review, the popular vote are the votes cast by the citizens, you and me. The electoral vote are the votes cast by the state representatives who make up the Electoral College. So, we vote, the popular vote is tallied, and then the Electoral College uses that vote to cast the actual vote. The voter's ballot will say the names of the candidates, just like you see in the picture here, but since the president and vice president are elected indirectly, the vote is really being cast for an elector who will officially choose those people. Now, if you look at this map here, sometimes there are certain states that are considered swing states. Ohio is a pretty important place to live because we are a swing state. No one ever knows if Ohio is going to end up Democratic or Republican. We tend to swing back and forth, and we have a lot of electoral votes at 18, so we're a pretty important part of the election. Once the votes are cast by the voters, it's determined as to which candidate won each state. In most states, the candidate that wins the state will get all of the state's electoral votes. For example, in the 2004 election, Kerry won the state of California, so he received that state's 55 electoral votes. Most states assign electoral votes in a winner-take-all fashion. Some states do not. In some states, candidates receive an electoral vote for receiving the most popular votes in a congressional district. Okay? So it kind of depends on which state you're in. Because of exit polls conducted by the media on Election Day, it's generally clear by the end of the night who the winner of the election will be, even though the official votes are not cast until December. You guys are all old enough that you've lived through several presidential elections at this point, and I'm sure you remember your parents or yourself staying up late to watch the electoral coverage on TV and find out who the real winner is. They haven't officially won yet, but we do know who's going to win. The rest of the procedure is practiced as tradition. 41 days after Election Day, the electors meet in the state capitol and cast their official votes. The Electoral College does not need to meet together as a single body. Electoral votes from each state are collected and sent to the President of the Senate, who then hands them over to Congress once they convene in early January. Then the votes are officially counted in the presence of both houses of Congress. According to the Constitution, if no one receives majority, 51%, according to the Constitution, if no one receives a majority of the electoral votes following the official counting, the House of Representatives is in charge with deciding the election. This has happened before, but this is a very, very rare occurrence. This system kind of explains how a presidential election can be won by a candidate who did not receive the majority of the people's vote. This happened most recently in the 2000 presidential election between Al Gore and George Bush. So Al Gore won the popular vote. So you would think that he would have won the election, but that was not the case because the people's vote influences the vote of the Electoral College, which is the actual vote. George Bush ended up winning the election with 271 Electoral College votes. This system is very complicated, and it doesn't make sense to a lot of people, so many people feel like we should actually abolish the Electoral College, and it's been debated for a while now. This is mostly because of the fact that a candidate can win the popular vote but lose the election. When the Constitution was drafted and plans were made for how to do a nationwide election, it was very difficult for the entire nation to communicate with one another, and communication took days, even weeks. They had to use the Pony Express, snail mail. Because of this, the Electoral College system made sense when it was created. Now, with modern technology, communication is quick and easy. Some say that we should change the system, but others feel we should leave it alone. What do you think?